Hi, everybody. This is Courtney Starhart. I am a traditional Native medicine practitioner and a holistic health expert and researcher with 25 years of experience. I'm here today to talk to you about what's going on in all of our lives. I know most of you are doctors, are healers, are therapists, holistic health practitioners, or human resources people. And I really appreciate you listening to me today because I'm a little bit different than what you're used to. I'd like to share with you a story about my first client. Probably all of you can remember your first client. Can you, take a moment and think back to whenever that first time was and what it felt like to really have that full hope and passion and potential? It's been 25 years for me. I don't know how long it's been for you. But over the 25 years, I have worked with people to help them step into their personal power, talking to leaders, doctors, athletes, entrepreneurs, people like Pete Seeger, all kinds of different people who are so spectacular. I wonder if you also have worked with amazing people and how much that really lights you up. I hope that you still have that passion that you've always had and that you got into this for. So, below in this article, you can see all of the medical terminology. I've written it all up for you because I love doing research. Um, the way that I got into this was because I got sick. I went to college at American University and I was a National Merit Scholar. So I had an open invite to take as many classes as I wanted to. I did 2 bachelors in 4 years. And then I went on later to get into a doctoral program that wasn't for me, and I ended up going out west to study with a Native American medicine man from an uninterrupted lineage. So this was incredibly interesting because not only did I have the opportunity to heal using this traditional Native medicine, I also acquired the skills over the years by working with this medicine man and hundreds of other Native leaders from around the world, as well as Chinese, Ayurvedic, and all kinds of masters. So, when I put this all together, I developed a system called Four Keys to the Force. We can talk about that later, but I want you to know that that's there and that there's a real tool to help real people today, that I've translated this stuff. And that's the crux of my work. Now, the other thing is that I'm a bridge person. I take native medicine and I translate it into modern day terminology and research that you guys can all relate to. So, probably a lot of you had that first client that gave you so much hope. And in the meantime, you might have had an arc of despair where you've seen clients who don't get well. You've seen the failures and you've learned, and maybe you've gone through the trenches and maybe you're tired and burnt out, or maybe your clients are. At any rate, we do know that half of America is sick and half of America is on pharmaceuticals. So we know that something is going wrong, right? So I'm going to tell you the story of my first client because I think it's a good way to talk to you about the research around ayahuasca and why we work with this. It is not our first line of defense. When I have a client that walks into my office, the first thing I do is schedule an intake appointment for them so we can figure out what's going on with them and what the first steps will be. With us, it's not one size fits all. I know if you go into a dentist's office, there's a 1, 2, 3 that happens. For us, the 1, 2, 3, 4 is figuring out what that person's issue is, where it comes from, and what the quickest way is to give them some relief. Oftentimes, simple breath work is going to give people relief from anxiety and stress, depression, and lots of other issues. So we teach a quick breathwork system. We're very practical people. The next thing we often look at is nutrition. Then we start looking at emotional health and PTSD and where that person comes from. And then when we've already gone through all of that, we start talking to people about plant medicine because it is the quickest way oftentimes to get people to where they're going. When you read in the details below what happens when people take plant medicine, you'll understand why we like it so much. It does so many things at the same time and is so powerful. It's just epic. And when you layer in the appropriate cultural, religious, and spiritual context from a real guide like myself, it is incredible. It is absolutely exponential, the power that you can plug into in a very quick amount of time when you have the right tools. It's just like anything else. When you're driving a car, you need to know where you're going. And the thing is, most people nowadays are not in the driver's seat. Their zombie sub programs, their subconscious, their anxiety, something else is in the driver's seat, right? Their default mode network or demons. So many ways of putting this, but we've all seen it when somebody is really not there and they're not able to get into the driver's seat of their vehicle, their life, their car, and they're not able to determine what direction they want to go, let alone actually use a sort of compass to navigate there. So, the story I want to tell you is about a veteran because there are a lot of veterans in my family, especially on the Native American side. Native Americans often serve disproportionately because of the poverty, because of the trauma, and the lack of resources on the reservations. They're pretty easy to recruit and they make amazing warriors, right? A lot of these people were trained as warriors and it's part of their spirit. My traditions are Pueblo and Cherokee, and we were not necessarily known as being warlike, though I do love martial arts and I really appreciate it. People like Navajos, Apaches, and whatnot, Comanches, Kiowa, Sioux, they were known as the fighters, and they make incredible military personnel. So, this particular individual who I want to tell you about was Native and Hispanic, Miguel. A lot of us are mixed blood, Hispanic and Native American, because when the Spanish conquered people, they mixed with them. They often, as we say, put a little cream in our coffee, whether we asked for it or not. In other words, they killed the men and they kept the women. And they mixed their blood with the women, either as wives or what have you. And so all of us are sort of interbred and more fair skinned than the original natives. I'm half European and half Native. So one side of my family's Native, one side is European. And it's great because it makes me bicultural. I have an Eastern Native education, I have a Western traditional empirical university education. These things go together, they're not contradictory or exclusive. I'm a bridge person. And so I'm going to bridge this story over to you about Miguel. Miguel was a gunny sergeant, a gunnery sergeant who trained the young men as they were coming into the military and got them ready for battle. He was a client of mine. He was my first client after I was done healing and after I was done with my residency, working for free, carrying bags, building buildings for the church. I built a sweat lodge along with the community. We helped finish off the kiva, which is our ceremonial structure. We built gardens, we built labyrinths, all for free as service to the community. When I was ready to have my first paying client, it was thrilling because I had someone who was interested in this healing modality called plant medicine. He went through Sweat Lodge with me. We went through a bunch of different things together, but he ultimately ended up working with plant medicine. And I want to tell you his story because it worked so marvelously. It was like, Creator was blessing me with an easy first client, right? But he was such a mess and he was suffering so much. I think he was probably willing to do anything. And he was also Native, as I said. So the idea of working with plant medicine wasn't foreign to him. So I've gone through all of the different things that you're going to read about the medical part and what ayahuasca does in our bodies so that you're able to kind of follow along with me. All right. So the first stage, when he first took the plant medicine, he started having visuals of his time in battle. All right. So he had been agoraphobic. So he had been kind of locked up in a cabin, except for when he could go out like really, really late at night and not see many people. He would drive 2 or 3 towns away to a Walmart where it would just be kind of him, the checkout guy. And he was, I think, on some level worried that he was going to have a panic attack when he was in public, although he didn't say that. So one of the things about working with Native and Hispanic veterans is they're very tight-lipped about their trauma. They're very reluctant to talk about it because they consider it part of being a man, part of being a warrior, to not wear their hearts on their shirt sleeves. And they often repress their trauma to the extent to which they're suicidal and they don't even know why. Well, it's because they've been jamming everything down. So before we even started working with medicine, just to loop back a little farther, we went to Miguel's cabin. I say we, I, and started doing walks. And he and I would press the boundary of his discomfort to where he was feeling that discomfort, but he wasn't having a panic attack. At first, we could only walk a mile, and then 2 miles and 3 miles. But what we would find out is that a lot of his anxiety was tied to these war experiences. He was still at war in his mind. And as things would start moving up from the amygdala, right? Because when you're walking, you're breathing, you're getting into a trance, you get out of the default mode network, the demons, that is the echoing, repetitive voice in the head. Right. So, as he was getting out of that and accessing the amygdala where those things were stored, he would start having little flashes and then he would jam it back down. So easily and gracefully, we went back and forth to that edge of his discomfort and started unpacking a few things to where I knew more or less what he had been through during God knows how many tours as a Gunny Sergeant. He was a decorated veteran. This guy was an amazing human being. He was the kind of guy you would want to babysit your children, to go on a walk with your aunt or your dog, or he would be the person that you would trust in church. I think nobody knew what he was going through. What he was going through was suicidal ideations with a gun in his hand every night for 7 years. Also, not sleeping, having sort of manic episodes, having probably undiagnosed psychotic breaks where he just couldn't take it anymore. And so, of course, then he would call the VA, he would get dosed up on more chemicals, and he finally had realized that that wasn't working for him, that that might have actually been leading to more psychosis because the medication he was on was so heavy. So unbelievable. And I don't know how many veterans go through this, probably a lot more than just Miguel. With that background, now imagine we get into the medicine. The first thing that happens when you take ayahuasca is it starts to like sort of upregulate your nervous system to where you're able to access the amygdala where trauma is stored. Most people are very avoidant of talking about this. And even in talk therapy after years, they don't really get into it. An hour session, honestly, isn't enough space or the right setting for people to go that deep. Not only do you have to access it, but then you have to process it through the brains. If you don't, then it leads to all kinds of other problems, the anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations. And Miguel actually also had IBS. So he had gotten some horrible leaky gut syndrome and the toxicity, probably from being exposed to burn piles while he was abroad. His gut was just completely falling apart. So if you don't deal with these emotional issues, they're going to deal with you until you listen. So that's that breaking point he was at. Thank God he was native and he felt comfortable coming to a medicine person and doing all the protocols, the sweat lodge, the fasting. He did an amazing job. So he gets into the medicine, starts accessing the amygdala, and these images of being at war start popping up. And he realizes as he's starting to process it, because now the medicine is going to go in and start connecting the frontal lobe, the neocortex, and the amygdala so that things can process through all of those brains. In order to release trauma, we actually have to process it through our logical brain and fully release it somatically. The medicine goes in there and does the somatic physical release as well. We're going to get to that. All right. So he starts processing that and he gets a handle on that. The next thing that happens, so we call that the underworld, right? That's the place where the zombies are driving your car, you've jammed all that stuff down, and they're all starting to come out, right? The middle world is the next world, and that's interesting because that's the part where the medicine is starting to get your theta and gamma brain waves online. We now have brain monitors on people taking the medicine, and we understand the lower, middle, and upper world are actually different brainwave states and different neurological biochemical processes. Isn't that fascinating? You can read all about it below. I love this stuff. So now at this point, Miguel is in the middle world. He starts seeing his ancestors, people that he's never met. Now, so here's another thing to understand about ayahuasca. As I'm talking to people about the medicine in New York, I see how they get twisted up. You can see them pucker a little bit. hold your breath. Oh, it's a drug. Oh, we don't do drugs here. I'm Native American, I'm a minister, and I trained for 20 years. Under the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act and the First Amendment, I do still have the right to practice my religion. That is a Native American religion, which consistently for tens of thousands of years has worked with plant medicine. Every single Supreme Court case that's ever come before any judge has upheld that right, whether it's peyote, ayahuasca, mushrooms, or anything. Understand it is not a drug when you're using it in this context. Number one. Number two, it is not a psychedelic. Ayahuasca is not a psychedelic. It is a deep somatic plant medicine that takes you into the spirit world. It detoxes and cleanses your physical vehicle and your meridian system so that you're able to plug into the force, hold more light, elevate your consciousness, and operate at completely different levels. Whether you're a veteran in distress or you're already a high achiever, although you can be in distress and be a high achiever, right? We all know that nowadays. But it levels you up because it keys you into the terrain of this inner world that oftentimes you can't see. Our inner world is oftentimes a mystery to us. And when we take plant medicine, it lights it up like a flare for 4 to 6 hours so that you can use your inner navigation system to map out this terrain that's often hidden to you. In the middle world, everything starts to come online, right? All the brains are in sync, and you're having a what? Not a psychedelic, a near death experience. You physicians, holistic health experts, pretty much anybody has met somebody or heard about somebody who had a near death experience and came back like, what the holy fuck was that? I saw this, I saw that. It's all real. I wasn't scared. It didn't hurt. It was actually cool. There's no hell. And they realize that they're a part of something that I call the force, for lack of a better word, right? So that right there. So Miguel sees his ancestors. They give him a plan. They tell him to go back. They honor him. They cover him in flowers and they honor him and they thank him for being a brave warrior. So boom, there goes his shame and his guilt, right? Then they say, look, if you want to heal completely, what you're going to do is go out there, grab the veterans off the streets, grab the people who are in recovery, and start making a community where you're farming. Buy a house, and wouldn't you know, the guy comes into a bunch of money. He gets a bunch of donors, almost like it was the hand of God. Before you know it, he's got a couple acres. He's pulling people off the streets. He's healing himself, and he's healing these other people. The upper world, where we truly find the force and we start bringing that light in, is what we call ego dissolution. That's something that often happens with a near-death experience as well. People sort of dissolve into a pool of light. That's the place where we come from, the unconditional love and the higher power. It really exists. We've just lost the manual for it. So I have the manual that's missing in your glove compartment, and I want to share it with you. It's called the 4 Keys Toolkit. Anybody can do it, but it does start with vision. So it's not like McDonald's and it's not like a cookie cutter template. It's not like writing a script and then people take it and they feel better or it masks the symptoms. This is going to root things out from the bottom. It's going to show you where that problem came from so that you can pull that out, examine it, and put it in its proper place once and for all. When you've done that properly, all kinds of things are happening in your body. Your body is shooting off new neural networks. There's, what is this? Reduction of trauma-related hyperconnectivity, ego dissolution of the default mode network, serotonin and oxytocin increase, and it cleans the gut. It resets the gut-brain axis so that serotonin and dopamine and all of those good things that are produced in the gut can come back online. So, as promised, I'm keeping this under 20 minutes. I want to send you guys lots of love. Please reach out to me. Let me know what I can do to serve you and your clients, and keep on tuning into Finding the Force. This is Courtney Starhide in Huntington, Long Island. Bye for now.